1901, 31st of May, was the first concert. That was a private concert. There was then on the 1st of June another gala concert. The hall was originally called Bechstein Hall, and it was built by Carl Bechstein, the piano maker. They had the showrooms next door, and it was a showcase for their pianos. The big piano makers did that in those days. Steinway's had their hall just up the road, actually. It was a golden age of the piano, and Bechstein's in particular were probably the most popular piano in England and possibly in Europe, but certainly in England. Steinways were still very much the American Steinways, as opposed to nowadays where we get all the Steinways come from Hamburg. Many of the artists in those days who came, of course, were pianists. You had people like Busoni, and then you had people like Cortot and Schnabel. They all came in the early days. Godowsky, all the great pianists came to play here. I think it probably took a little while to build up. It's interesting looking at the programs. You know, the first few years, various people just hired the hall, and you have some singers or mixed programs. It's quite interesting to see the type of programming, which was quite different to now. You would have a mixed program with maybe a singer assisted by somebody else, and then the poor accompanist might have his name or her name down at the very end of the page in small letters, you know, assisted by or at the piano, whoever was accompanying, you know. So that's changed, and probably longer programs by the sounds of it, and much more bitty, maybe just a few songs, a violin piece or a cello piece, but then you did have some string quartets, though they didn't come until about 1903 or 1904, when the string quartets started coming regularly, and then you would have a string quartet like we would have today with 3 quartets or whatever. It was the more popular performers like Busoni or Godowsky. They came and did full recitals, but they were usually in the afternoon. You often had 2 concerts a day. You had afternoon performances and then another one maybe at 8:30 in the evening. But it was all the well-known people who came in the afternoons, which is quite interesting. That's rather different to now. But I suppose it was a different lifestyle. The First World War had a huge impact on the hall. Bechstein was a German, and there was a backlash of anti-German feeling, particularly from the editor of a downgrade piano magazine. The hall's license needed to be renewed in 1916, and this man objected on the grounds that it was German pianos and people should be buying English pianos and not German pianos. And he objected to the granting of the license, which was then refused. So that's why it closed down and was bought by Debenham's department store for £53,000, which included the hall, all the showrooms, 37 pianos, which was quite astounding, really. Apparently the hall alone had cost £100,000 to build, so really they got a bargain there. But it reopened as Wigmore Hall in 1917. The first concert was on January the 16th. Albert Samuels is the violinist and the pianist was Safonov, playing Beethoven's sonatas. The name Wigmore, it comes from the village of Wigmore down in Herefordshire. And in fact, all the street names around here are connected with Wigmore and that area of Herefordshire. It's near Ludlow in Shropshire. It's about 6 miles from Ludlow. And that was owned by the Earl of Oxford, Baron Harley, Earl of Oxford. So Harley Street, Oxford Street, and there's a Mortimer Wood. It's all connected, and there's a Mortimer Street. So all the streets around here must have belonged to that family at some stage. Up in the archive, we have a print of Wigmore Castle in Herefordshire. It's a ruin. They restored it there just a few years ago as a romantic ruin. And this is a print, was obviously taken from a book, but it's signed by Elgar on the first performance of his string quartet and piano quintet here on the 21st of May 1919. After the war into the 1920s, there was a slow build-up of concerts again, but generally there was a full schedule. We have all the programs from the 1920s. There's a real mixture of programs. So there are some for the wounded of the war, and then there are obviously some of the more well-known artists coming back again. There's a real mixture. There are some jazz concerts. There are some popular music concerts. It's quite difficult to imagine the fact that you can fit an orchestra on stage, but there were quite a few orchestral concerts. They had an extension to the stage which used to come out over the first couple of rows, and I do have a photograph in the archive of an orchestra on stage with a couple of solos standing out on the extension. As far as I can tell, the 1930s were good. There were lots of, again, the artists were still coming. During the Second World War, there were concerts right through the war, although not every day. And on some of the programs, you will see concert abandoned, which presumably meant there was a bomb scare or whatever. But there was quite a lot of new music in the war years. There was a big Boozy and Hawks series where they put on quite a few first performances, including the first performance of Britain's Serenade for Tenor, Horn and Strings, which was in 1943. Britain, of course, was somebody who came here regularly, Britten and Peers, and quite a few of his works were first performed here. 1945, there was a great concert, two concerts in fact, 21st and 22nd of November, Britain's birthday. It was also a Purcell anniversary, and Britain and Sir Michael Tippett actually took part in this particular concert. But there was the first performance of Britain's String Quartet No. 2, and also the Holy Sonnets of John Donne on these concerts, so I'd like to have been at those too. Another fascinating programme which I'd like to have come to was in 1946, not music, poetry. It was an afternoon of poetry with John Masefield presiding as the poet laureate, and every poet was here. Louis MacNeice, Walter Delamere, T.S. Eliot, Dylan Thomas, all reading their own poetry, and also some older poetry. And the Queen and the two princesses were in the audience. So I'd really like to have been at that one. I think that must have been fascinating.